This episode of Own the Grey is brought to you by I Am. Discover your unique talents, realize your potential, and align to your path. Take the first step to uncover your life purpose by visiting debrajones.ca/courses. How can you get to 71 years young and not have a career change? Or 6? Amy Greenberg spends her time, and I quote, quitting jobs and going to therapy. And in 2020, when COVID quit her teaching job for her, she bounced right back and reinvented herself yet again. We've all heard that humor is the best medicine. And with so many of us suffering the dispiriting effects of pandemic life, Amy ventured to bring her own brilliant light into our darkness. I urge you to visit yougotalaugh.com, and within minutes you'll catch Amy's infectious zest for life, guaranteed. I reached out to Amy, and she agreed to share her remarkable story with you to prove that what goes down must come up. Welcome to Own the Grey, a podcast to dispel the notion that aging is undesirable and setting new positive attitudes. I'm Deborah Jones, and I believe you can be vibrant and healthy throughout the best years of your life. I've been on your website and I have laughed and it has surprised me. And I really love the concept of what you're doing and why, but you've got a backstory and I'd like you to share that with our listeners.
So my backstory, Deb, well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited. So my backstory is pretty long because I'm very old. Okay. But the two things I think that I want to say to frame this is that I've always been a dreamer and I've never given up on having a dream and pursuing it one way or the other. The other thing is that I've always lived to work. Now, you hear people say they work to live. Not me. I don't understand that. I've always lived to work. And when people say to me, oh, when are you going to retire? I literally cringe. I can't even say, it's a miracle that I could say that word right now because it's not a word that I would ever use in reference to myself. But life brings you curveballs, right?
Absolutely.
So, and the thing is that it's interesting to look back a million years ago when I was a little girl, and I must have known right then when I was like 8 or 9 or 10 that I was going to be a working woman, because more than anything, I loved to be in my bedroom with the door closed and engage in pretend play. But it was always pretend play about something that had to do with a job. So my parents bought me a blackboard that had wheels and I could roll it around, and I got chalk and an eraser. And I gathered all my old workbooks from, elementary school. And I sat my dolls and my stuffed animals in rows. And I taught them reading and spelling and math.
Okay.
And when I wasn't being a teacher, I was running a store. And I had my own cash register and play money. And I set up products. And who were my shoppers? My teddy bears and my dolls. But the thing is, I never, ever engaged in pretend mom play. I didn't baby my dolls. I didn't diaper them or feed them. I didn't push them around in a little stroller. I never did any of that. And it's so interesting to be so young and to see how accurate that picture of my younger years proved to be.
Uh-huh.
My dream was to be a working woman. I don't know if I used those particular words. I was like 10 or 11, but no, I wanted to be out there. And so I got a good start. I I earned a master's degree in my 20s, very early 20s, and I was going to be an English teacher, an English professor at the college level.
Okay.
I didn't want to teach high school, or God forbid, like elementary school, or even worse, like middle. I wanted to be an English professor.
Okay.
But I lived in New York City, and I took a lot of cabs. And 9 out of 10 of the cab drivers with whom I spoke had masters or PhDs in English. Were they teaching at the college level? No, they were driving a taxi. So, I got the message. And some friends of mine suggested I go into public relations. I go, okay, whatever that is. And I got a job in PR, and I loved it. I loved it. I was talking to the press about hot dogs and sunglasses and banks and whatever it was.
Yeah.
I could sell it.
Yeah.
And then one morning, it was a work morning, so I was going to get up and go to work. And like a light bulb went on. Oh, I'm going to be an actress.
Okay.
Now, my father was a playwright. My parents dragged me around to every off Broadway show in a bar in New York City in the Bowery. So I had theater in my blood.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that was my next dream. I was going to be an actress like that. And it was like easy peasy, just put together a plan and make it happen, right?
And did you?
Yes. I did. So for 10 years.
Okay.
I started out as an acting student. I knew a lot about the theater, but I didn't know how to be an actor. And I loved it. And I was on the stage and I did commercials. And then I started teaching acting. But I supplemented my income with my PR work as a freelancer.
Smart.
It was fabulous. It was difficult. It was extremely discouraging. But being an actor and an acting teacher just felt so empowering to me. And then I had an accident. And boom, that was it. It was over.
Career's over.
I could barely get out of the house. I was on crutches. It was terrible. And that was the end of that. That was the end of that dream. And it was really hard. I mourn that loss to this day.
Mm-hmm.
But
But
I figured, okay, so I can act. Well, what can I do sitting on my tush in front of a computer and a phone? I could be a PR person again. So I started my own business.
good for you.
Yeah, it had a beautiful name. I worked out of a tiny apartment in Greenwich Village. It was a studio apartment. And I had 2 part-time employees, both women. And that, my dear, was a conscious choice because I kind of felt early on in my life that men had the advantage over women. No offense to men. It's sort of not their fault, I guess, but that men were always one step ahead of the women, with pay and opportunities. And I just knew that was not okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when I had my small home-based, I only hired women, and I loved it. On the phone, talking to the media, pitching, hot dogs and meatballs and hairspray and blah, blah, blah. And then as I turned 50, New York was hit by 9/11, and my home office was downtown. So that was a big shock. I saw it happen. And my employees who showed up that morning saw it happen.
Wow.
And my business dried up. My clients they were losing money. My clients were having financial issues because of 9/11, the economy, and so on and so forth. But however, should I continue?
Absolutely. Keep going. I'm enthralled.
Okay. So in my mid 40s, and I know that this is a very strong focus for you on the podcast, is I started to experience menopause. I started getting hot flashes, and oh my God, I'm not exaggerating when I say to you that I had never given one thought to menopause in my entire 45 or 6 years. I never talked about it with my mother. I had zero interest in the subject. And I maintained what I called a willing and blissful ignorance. And then boom, there it was. And I was sweating all the time,
Wow.
and I was taking my sweater off and putting it on. And then it was really interesting. So I mentioned it to my friends, and some of them were older than me and were either going through it unbeknownst to me or had gone through it. And they began to talk to me about menopause. And then they started to talk to me about their mother's experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that this was a thing, and I looked around also, and the media was getting very hot on menopause at that time. People were really starting to write books and really talk about it, and it was coming out of the closet.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea. So one of my dreams has always been to write a book. So where are we going with this?
You wrote a book.
Well, I sort of did. What I decided was, so I began to see that people like my friends and their moms wanted to talk about this. So I decided I was going to travel around the country and I was going to interview women about menopause.
Okay.
But I was going to interview women from all walks of life, rich, poor, whatever. So I practiced interviewing on my friends and their mothers, and everything was, audio taped and transcribed. I got a transcriber.
Uh-huh.
And I enlisted my friend, who is a whole nother episode in and of herself. Her name is Muriel. I wrote a story about her, who is 27 and plus years older than me, had polio as a little girl and is handicapped. And I said, I didn't know how to drive because being in New York, I didn't have a car. And I know that when you leave New York City, you have to drive. That whole concept was really foreign to me because I don't have any subways out there. And so I knew that I couldn't drive, but she loved to drive. She was crazy about driving. So we flew around the country. And then when we got off the plane, we'd get a car and she'd drive. And we spent 4 days in Montana on the Blackfeet Indian Reservation. And I interviewed Blackfeet women about menopause. And their stories were just unbelievable. We flew to Gulfport, Florida, which happens to have a large community of gay women. They were a hoot. Interviewed them. And we flew to Los Angeles, where I hooked up with a female minister of an African-American Methodist church. And I interviewed the minister and some of her parishioners. And then I got an interpreter, and I interviewed women from Thailand who were living somewhere in the Los Angeles area who didn't speak English. So, and more.
Wow. What did you learn from that?
What did I learn? I learned that, but I think I always already knew this, but that women have a connection with one another that is different from our connection with men, and that we are capable of such deep love and compassion for one another. Because these women, some of them spoke to me, especially the ones on the reservation, about things like alcoholism and how men in their lives with alcoholism, many of them themselves were drinking, but they were still willing to talk to me. They called me the white girl from New York City. Clearly they'd never met anybody like me, but I'd never met anybody like them.
Wow.
And I think there's just something magic about women. So that's kind of what I learned. And that I learned that so many women have these secrets. Because the stories many of them were telling me were stories they never told anybody else.
Right.
So we're all sitting here with all of these mysteries and only to be tapped by a willing listener.
Yeah, that's really great that they trusted you enough to tell you those secrets. And yeah, who does ask those questions? Nobody.
But the book didn't sell. My agent got 26 rejections.
Oh my God. Hey, you needed to be your own PR in that respect.
Oh, I did. So now I have dozens of these stories unheard of by the world, but maybe that's another story, Deborah.
Oh, yeah. So where did you go from there?
Oh, well. So in the meantime, I was still running my PR biz. And I guess my employees hung out and took care of things for me when I disappeared.
Right.
But also in my mid-40s, I did something else.
What?
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I founded a women's group called the All Girls Dream Salon. Now, I would never, ever, ever call a female over the age of 18 a girl, because when you're 18, you're not a girl, you're a woman, a young woman.
Right.
So the word girls in All Girls Dream Salon can you guess how it's spelled?
The most common way, with the G and the R's all over the place.
I invented that.
Did you?
Because remember, this was like 1987 or 97, or I don't know. I invented
You're
that.
right. I guess so.
The All Girls Dream Salon, GRRRLS, and it's pronounced girls.
Cool.
And this ties into the statement I made in the beginning that I've always been a dreamer. So the purpose of the Dream Salon was to create a safe and confidential space where women could give voice to their dreams that were up here in their heads. Because what I thought was, if you speak about something, if you manifest it in the universe and there are witnesses, meaning the other members of the salon, the dream begins to take on a reality. It starts to become concrete, and you begin to think that it's actionable. You could really do it.
Yeah.
But it's not until you give voice to it and have people listen to you and respond to you,
Yeah,
that you're really, I think, able to take those next steps that you need.
yeah. It gives it a foundation, doesn't it?
We invited one another to be dreamers, but to move from the dreaming phase to the action phase.
Right.
And it's during the course of this salon that I gave voice to my next career. We had one woman wrote a book about her very interesting marriage to a police officer. And I mean, everybody had a dream, and it went on and on and on.
Uh-huh.
So at 49, I was still running my PR biz, but I began to really I began to ask myself this question, and it's going to sound really weird, but it's true.
Mm-hmm.
And the question I began to ask myself, what do I want on my tombstone? Do I want it to say, here lies the world's greatest publicist? And what was the answer?
I guess no.
No, I wanted something more meaningful than that, than selling products, even though I just loved it. I loved doing it. And kind of started to feel that I wanted to help people even more than beyond, let's say, the salon or the women I spoke to.
Mm-hmm.
So you ask, or you say that life begins at 50, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you ask that question, does life begin at 50?
That was one of my podcasts. That's right.
That was one of your podcasts, right? I read it. I mean, I listened to it.
Yeah.
So I was 50, and what was next? I changed careers.
What did you do?
I became a special education teacher.
Okay. Was that a dream of yours?
No, it wasn't until practically the day I thought of it. Because, and this is going to sound really awful to your listeners, but in full disclosure, I never ever wanted to be a parent.
Okay.
I didn't understand children. I didn't know how to be around them. I was involved in my career or whatever I was doing at that moment. But somehow over the years, by the time I reached 50, I began to take an interest in children, like children that I saw around or in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard something about special education. That sounded kind of cool. I don't know, like being like Mary Poppins or something like that, or like the angel, who comes down and helps, transform children. I don't know. I had no idea what I was getting into, frankly.
Okay.
Literally.
Yeah.
But I began to feel that there was something in this. And so I talked about it in the salon, in the dream salon.
Uh-huh.
And I said, well, I'll just start a school for special needs kids and I'll just read a few books. I mean, for a smart chick, I wasn't too smart when I thought about that. I was like an idiot, total idiot.
Well, how did that go?
Well, it went really well because I knew that there was a special college in New York City that I'd heard of that only granted master's degrees in education, including special ed. So I took a course and I liked it and I got an A. So I took another course and I liked that. And I got an A in that. Wow. And then I took another one and another one. And then I got this really threatening letter from the college saying you can't keep enrolling in classes without matriculating.
Okay.
I was just going to keep, stockpiling the credits,
Sure, yeah.
So I said, okay, I'll matriculate. So I officially enrolled.
Yeah.
And I got my master's degree at 53.
Good for you.
And I worked in the field for 18 years.
Wow. Good for you.
As a special educator. And that was almost as good as being an actor.
Almost.
But the story is not over.
Then what?
But we're winding down, Deborah. I'm sure you'd be relieved.
Why? I wouldn't call it winding down. It sounds like you're ramping up, but go ahead. What happened next?
So what happened next? So here I am 70 and I'm still working. Mm-hmm. And COVID hit. Mm-hmm. And I was still employed as a special educator, but the school shut down. And so I wasn't really doing all that much, but I was still on the payroll. And I thought, oh God, this is such a mess. And I started to write about my pandemic experiences, like, I don't know, talking to my friends about how with the lockdown, they were going to spend all their time cleaning their houses. And I didn't understand that. And there's a story about that called Domestic Goddess. You may have read that.
I read that, yeah. You're not one.
No. Nor do I aspire to be.
Okay.
And then I started talking to friends and about the crazy ways that they were coping. And so I began to write these stories and sending them to my friends and family, and they were laughing. So somebody told me about a blog. So, okay, I started a blog. I had a lot of help.
Okay.
I didn't know anything about that. And people were laughing at my stuff. And I could see that there was more than one way to skin a cat, so to speak. No offense to cat people, because I am one. Mm-hmm. But you can affect people by teaching their children, right? Or interacting with families and helping them understand their kids. You can start a salon and help people reach their dreams. And you can make them laugh. And it just seems so obvious all of a sudden, that this was something I could do at home. But then in October 2020, COVID cost me my teaching job.
Oh.
And that's where we wind up with, as I mentioned in the beginning, I lived to work and I was unemployed against my will for the first time in 50 years. And I began to suffer mental health challenges in January of 2021.
Okay.
And they were significant. And they were related to my being unemployed and losing that very, very carefully built persona about, living to work and being a working woman and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. And I had to go into intense therapy as an outpatient on Zoom. And it does work. Okay. It was group therapy on Zoom.
Yeah.
And I was very lucky because I was starting to fall apart. Like everything that I knew about myself felt like it had been swept away by suddenly being unemployed and not knowing if there was a way back because of COVID, especially at my age. Mm-hmm. I didn't have a workplace. I didn't have a paycheck. I didn't have a leadership role in anything. I didn't feel fulfilled. Mm-hmm. And since then, and I do have a history of therapy also, but this was a very specific kind of identity crisis that really shook me to my core. I had no hobbies. I couldn't tolerate the idea of retiring. And there I was with nothing to do. And I did have a blog, but I wasn't going anywhere. and I wasn't being part of the workforce. And so 2021 was like really, really hard.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to tell you that I got very lucky because the mental health support that I got was great. But I had to find a new dream. But being kind of a different person,
Right.
being unemployed because of COVID really forced me to take a look at myself. That you have to have something inside yourself that's really, really strong and is yours and yours alone, and that's unrelated to anything outside yourself. And that's called a really strong core, a really strong sense of self. And I was kind of weak in that area and I didn't know it. So it was a big deal what happened.
Yeah.
So now at 71, I'm finding projects and activities, working on the blog, maybe a podcast. I run a parent support group. It's free. I coach a couple of parents who have special needs kids. And there's the possibility that I may be an acting teacher at our local community theater, but that's depending on COVID.
Right.
So that's where I stand. I just want to qualify everything I've said, that I'm no superwoman and that I was able to accomplish all these crazy things that I did and these exciting things that I did. And this may be a controversial statement, and I hope it's not inappropriate, but I wasn't married. I didn't have children. I didn't have grandchildren. I could do whatever I wanted. And I gained something by being footloose and fancy free, but I also lost. And by the miracle of eHarmony, I met a guy. I was 61. He was a baby. He was 60. And we got married at 66.
Wow. Congrats.
The wedding was called the wedding of the century. And nobody ever thought I would get married. I didn't think that would happen. And we adopted 2 little girls.
Wow.
Their names are Fluffy Puss and Peekaboo.
Okay, I know who they are.
You know
they are your fur babies.
They are my fur babies. So, I think what I would like people, women, to know, that dreams are anything that you want them to be. There's no like particular size that's right or particular shape. Like there's no wrong dream. It's just something that gives you a sense of meaning and purpose in your life, whatever it is. And I think that no matter how old you are, because Muriel is 97 and a half and she's still going strong and she still has dreams, or no matter how young you are, I think, you deserve to open up yourself to a dream and to follow it, because it's never too late.
That's a really great message, and your story is really testament to that. I mean, you reinvented yourself every step of the way. The resiliency, I think, is what's necessary, and also a confidence in yourself. So you mentioned when you were forced to find yourself. I have a sense that you already knew who you were inside, and that's what kept you going. That's what made you turn a corner and then try something new, because you did know that you are the type of person that you are. I think that was the one thing that is the vein that runs through all of your stories, is you would never give up on a dream unless you were forced to.
And then I'd find another one.
And then you would find another one. Yeah. Exactly. And that's what I call resiliency, and it doesn't matter. Your story is so timely with what we're going through in the world right now. And I don't think that your story is something that is not doable for people. I think anybody can find that resiliency inside. And it's something that we're born with. I mean, we're born with a will to survive, or we would not have survived those first few hours of our birth, right? There was something that kicked in, and it sounds like it kicked in overdrive in your life. And with some people, it does. There's a lot of your story that I can relate to as well. And I have the same perspective, is that there's no dead end. There's no dead end. There's just an end of an experience. Right. And then there's always a new one just around the corner. But it's that mental health aspect that you talked about that I know is probably very serious for you to go through that. But I think something like that can also make you. can make you realize who you are. Do you want to just talk to that a little bit about what you learned going through that experience?
Oy, oy, oy.
Where do we start? If we could put it in a nutshell.
A nutshell. I was going to therapy, an intensive therapy for 9 hours a week for 4 months. It's
And I
hard
want
to
put it in a nutshell.
Well, being a New Yorker, I was always very like hip to people being in therapy. And I was in therapy. I'll tell you this, I've been in therapy my whole life, basically. Okay, really, that's true.
Cool.
And so I know how to get help for myself.
Yeah.
And I was never ashamed of asking for help. I still think that it is very, very hard for people, men, women, young and old, to reveal a mental health vulnerability. For most of us, it's really, really hard. And I never discussed it with my friends that I was struggling, through my life. But the thing that I learned during those 4 months of being on Zoom 9 hours a week, because it was in a group, was that people are just amazing. First of all, people are amazing to survive some of the things that they survive. And, we live in a very, very tough world, and there's a lot of suffering, not just with COVID, but we know this in general.
Yeah.
And it was just remarkable to me that some of the people in my group could survive their lives, but they did. And they were there because they wanted to keep going. Right? Because that was the better choice than the alternative.
Yeah.
And that was really humbling for me, because I have things pretty good right now. And even then, during this crisis, I have a lovely husband and the cats and the house and all that. It was just really humbling to hear other people talk about what they had been going through, and to know that, OMG, I had so much to be thankful for.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I realized is that if you give people a chance to be generous, they will be generous. And the people in my groups were generous. We were all generous to one another. People who were total strangers. I mean, I started out as a total stranger. I didn't know anybody in those Zooms, and there were like maybe 12 people, and I didn't know. And it's just amazing how, when the setting is right and the support is right, and you decide to open up your heart in a generous way to another person, it's amazing what happens. And I think we've lost sight of that in general, that ability to have a generous, open heart and to feel other people's pain.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like it's in short supply.
Yeah. I recognized that a few years back when I was looking for somewhere to experience that kind of thing, that acceptance of who you are. And that's when I started the Red Tent. So I'm the founder of Red Tent Ontario, which is a women's gathering that we gather every month. We do have a physical Red Tent, but since COVID hit, it's all been virtual. But it was and still is a place where women can go and feel safe enough to open up and share things that they might not normally share, not for therapy, because therapy is designed to be the one-on-one, but the idea of listening to your own voice say those words, even that itself, even just sharing what you're going through or what you're feeling, and not needing to be fixed, but just to have it come out of you, is very similar to what you've been talking about, of how those women, when you did your menopause book, opened up to you as well. And that probably helped them more than you'll ever know. So even though your book didn't sell yet, I'm thinking that the act of doing that research probably made a huge difference that you may never even have any awareness of. And I think, it's special when we come together, whether it's one-on-one or whether it's a group of people, whether you're listening to the podcast, whatever it is, we're coming together. I'm in your ears. We're in your ears. But that connectedness is what we all need. And I'm kind of hearing that with what you've just spoken about of how therapy helped you. So going through that, and I assume you're out the other side of at least the darkest experiences. You learned, and I read this in your website, that you learned about laughter being the best medicine. And I guess that's why you started your blog and your website. Would you like to share what the purpose of that is from your perspective?
Well, so the website is called, appropriately enough, yougottalaugh.com. Is that okay for me to say that?
Absolutely. I'll put a
Yeah.
link in the show notes so they know the spelling of it. But yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the spelling is UGOTTALAFF.com. Okay.
Yep.
Well, really, it's interesting because the purpose of the blog has kind of changed a little bit, but mostly for me, it's about making people laugh, helping them smile. You know, I have a lot of funny videos in my various stories that are just hilarious, whether it's cats or comics or, you know, funny things. But also, I think when I wrote this, I wrote a story about this mental health struggle and I posted it on the blog. And I got the best response of all of my stories was to that one.
Uh-huh.
And it was, I think, the first time, well, it wasn't the first time I wrote something serious, because a couple of other stories were not like a laugh riot exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But this was the first time where it was really serious stuff. And I wanted it to be inspiring, but I wanted people to know that you can come out of the closet. I used that expression before because I feel like there's a lot of us live secret lives one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted people to know that it was okay to have mental health problems. And mental health is now a big trending topic. Like everybody's talking about mental health. But when push comes to shove, it is really okay to open up your mouth and speak about it. If I could do that, give permission to other people to talk about it by virtue of being so public, then I figured it was worth it. I didn't know what the response would be. I didn't want people to feel sorry for me or grossed out or anything like that. But I'll always have crazy characters in there and nutty people and bad recipes.
Listeners, you really do need to check out this website because I read a few of them and I'm not opposed to laughing. I just don't laugh a heck of a lot, but I laughed a lot when I was looking through your website. There was so many things, so many videos. And, you know, you come out of left field sometimes, and I really appreciate that kind of humor. And, it's really, it's really cool. I really love there's one category called the songbook. And so it takes me down memory lane with some of the lyrics of the songs that I grew up with as well. And your COVID musings, I think, that's so needed. That's one of the reasons why I thought I'd have you on the show, because things are getting really heavy in the world. There's so much pressure and mental health issues. We laugh about it, but it really is a very serious issue. And as a healer/therapist myself, I see it every day with my clients. And so laughter really is the best medicine. Laughter resets that fear feeling. And so that you can be at zero again, so that you can start to build something from that point. So laughter is like, a spoonful of laughter, and you can get back on track, back on your life. So, if anybody is struggling, do reach out, just as Amy did, find some support, find some help. You can reach out to me. I can help redirect if I can't help you. But I think it's so important for us to, as you said before, help each other, be kind to each other. We're all on this journey and we're all winging it. If you just had one message that would help inspire us in these crazy times, as far as laughter is concerned, what would you tell us?
One tip that I have, because I still have my bad times, my anxious, my, scary episodes. And one of the things that I do is I go right to YouTube and I turn on a cat video or a dog video or a baby animal video of human babies. And I literally sit there and make myself watch that thing, whether it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes, because I know that I'm going to laugh and I know that it's going to change my brain. And it works. It works.
Go to ownthegray.ca to follow us and listen to more great episodes. Or you can listen on Apple, Spotify, Google, iTunes, Amazon Music, Stitcher, and more. This episode of Own the Gray is brought to you by I Am. Discover your unique talents, realize your potential, and align to your path. Take the first step to uncover your life purpose by visiting debrajones.ca/courses.